What started as a dream honeymoon in the tropical haven of Maui ended in a chilling crime that shocked the world. Behind the perfect Instagram posts and the fairy tale romance, a dark secret was brewing, one that would unravel in the most horrifying way. This is the story of Emily Carter, a vibrant young woman whose life was cut short by the man who vowed to love her forever. But was it love or obsession? And what really happened on that fateful night? Before we dive deep into this story, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel here on The Last Confession for more interesting stories. The sun shone brightly over Los Angeles International Airport as Daniel and Emily Carter prepared to board their flight. The newlyweds, both beaming with excitement, had just celebrated a lavish wedding attended by hundreds of guests. Their honeymoon destination, Hawaii, a tropical paradise famous for its white sandy beaches, crystal clear waters, and lush landscapes. For Emily, this trip was a dream come true. At 27 years old, she had built a successful career as a fashion designer, creating bespoke outfits for elite clients in Los Angeles. She was ambitious, vibrant, and full of life. Marrying Daniel felt like the next chapter in her fairy tale journey. Daniel, 32 years old, was a well-established businessman in the tech industry. He was charming, confident, and wealthy. Everything Emily had wanted in a husband. He was protective, sometimes overly so, but Emily had convinced herself it was just his way of loving her deeply. As they settled into their first-class seats, Emily took a selfie, flashing her engagement ring and captioning it, "Honeymoon mode activated. Hawaii, here we come." Her friends flooded the comments with heart emojis and congratulations. To the world, they were the perfect couple. Young, beautiful, and deeply in love. But beneath the surface, cracks had already started to show. While the wedding had been grand, a few close friends had noticed the tension between the couple. They landed at Kahului Airport in Maui just before sunset. A chauffeur from their luxury resort was already waiting, holding a sign that read Mr. and Mrs. Carter. As their car cruised along the coastal roads, Emily was mesmerized by the scenery. Endless stretches of turquoise waters, swaying palm trees, and small fishing boats dotting the horizon. She reached for Daniel's hand and squeezed it. "This is beautiful, Danny. Thank you for making this happen." He kissed her hand, smiling. "Anything for you, my queen." They checked into the Royal Maui Beach Resort, a secluded high-end escape designed for lovers seeking romance and privacy. That first night, they had dinner on the beach under the stars, sipping expensive wine and feeding each other bites of grilled seafood. A local band played Hawaiian love songs, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. As Emily lay in bed that night, wrapped in Daniel's arms, she sighed contentedly. This is the start of our forever. But what she didn't know was that forever wouldn't last long. Because just beneath the surface of this paradise, a storm was brewing. One that would turn their honeymoon into a nightmare. The first few days in Maui were everything Emily had dreamed of. Long walks on the beach, candlelit dinners, and luxurious spa treatments. The island was a paradise. To the world, they were the perfect couple, and Emily played along. She posted pictures on Instagram, smiling in her flowing beach dresses, sipping cocktails by the pool, and holding hands with Daniel in front of breathtaking ocean views. Her captions were full of love. "My forever. My king. No place I'd rather be than in his arms." But behind the filters and perfect poses, the cracks in their marriage were growing deeper. On their second night at the resort, Emily noticed something odd about Daniel's behavior. They had gone to a beach party hosted by the resort, where couples danced under the moonlight. Emily was laughing with a group of tourists when Daniel pulled her aside, his grip tight on her arm. "Why are you laughing so much with those men?" he demanded. Emily blinked. "Daniel, I was just being friendly." His jaw clenched. "You're my wife. You shouldn't be entertaining strangers." His tone was sharp, but before she could argue, he forced a smile and led her back to the dance floor. To everyone watching, they were just another happy couple. Later that night, Emily texted her best friend, Sarah. "Daniel is acting strange." Sarah replied almost immediately, "What do you mean? Are you okay?" Emily hesitated, She didn't want to ruin the honeymoon with unnecessary worries. Finally, she typed, "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just little things. Nothing serious." She didn't know then that this was just the beginning. On the fourth day, things escalated. Emily had just come out of the shower when she noticed Daniel sitting on the bed, scrolling through her phone. "What are you doing?" she asked, wrapping a towel around herself. Daniel didn't even look up. "Who's Chris?" Emily's stomach dropped. Chris was an old friend from college, a completely harmless connection. "He's just a friend," she said carefully. Daniel finally looked at her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Why is he liking all your pictures? And why did he text you before the wedding?" Emily's anger rose. "Daniel, are you seriously going through my messages?" He stood up, holding the phone in his fist. "I have the right to. You're my wife, Emily. I should know who you talk to." Emily felt her anger rise. "This is ridiculous. You're being paranoid." Before she could reach for her phone, he threw it against the wall, shattering the screen. She gasped. "Daniel, what the hell? You think I don't see how men look at you?" He spat. "You belong to me, Emily. Act like it." For the first time, she felt truly afraid. That night, while Daniel slept beside her, Emily carefully picked up her broken phone and tried to send a message to Sarah. Asterisk. "I need to leave." Asterisk, but the screen was unresponsive. She was trapped in paradise with a man who was becoming a stranger before her eyes. Emily woke up before dawn, her heart still pounding from the night before. The sound of the waves outside, once soothing, now felt eerie, almost like a warning. Daniel's possessiveness had always been there, but last night was the first time she had truly seen the rage beneath his charm. She glanced at his sleeping figure beside her. His face, so peaceful now, was a stark contrast to the man who had shattered her phone in anger just hours ago. "I need to leave," the thought echoed in her mind. But where would she go? They were in a foreign country, in a private villa, with no easy escape. She had no working phone, no way to contact anyone. Her stomach churned. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe he was just upset. It's our honeymoon. Stress, excitement, everything mixed together. She turned away and forced herself to sleep again. But deep down, she knew the truth. This was no longer the honeymoon she had dreamed of. The next morning, Emily plastered on a smile as they joined other couples for breakfast at the resort's oceanfront restaurant. "Good morning, my love," Daniel said, kissing her cheek. She flinched just slightly but covered it up by reaching for her coffee. A waiter approached with a tray of fresh fruit, and as Emily thanked him with a polite smile, she felt Daniel's hand grip her thigh under the table. "Why are you smiling at him?" he murmured. She froze. "Daniel, stop this." "Stop what?" he said, his voice low but firm. "I just don't want you embarrassing me. Be mindful of how you act, Emily." She didn't argue, not here, not in public. Instead, she focused on her plate, pretending nothing was wrong. But inside, she felt like a prisoner. That afternoon, Emily found a brief moment of solitude while Daniel was on a business call. She wandered toward the beach, letting her feet sink into the warm sand, trying to clear her thoughts. "You look troubled, sister," a voice said. She turned to see Maria, one of the resort's housekeepers, watching her with kind but concerned eyes. Emily hesitated. Should she say something? "I'm fine," she lied. Maria smiled softly. "I've worked here for many years. I see many couples. Some come in love and leave even more in love. Others?" She paused, lowering her voice. "I see their pain before they even realize it themselves." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "You are not fine, sister." For a moment, she considered telling Maria everything. But then she felt a presence behind her. Daniel. He wrapped an arm around her waist, his grip firm. "Everything okay, my love?" Emily forced a smile. "Yes, just enjoying the view." Daniel's eyes flickered to Maria before he tightened his hold. "Good. Let's go back to the room." Maria's gaze lingered on Emily for a second longer, as if silently telling her, "You are not alone." But as Daniel led her away, Emily knew one thing for sure. If she didn't leave soon, she might never leave at all. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the turquoise waters of Maui. But inside their private villa, a storm was brewing. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers gripping the bedsheet. Across from her, Daniel stood by the window, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just humiliated her at breakfast. As if he hadn't made her feel like a possession instead of a wife. "Daniel, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. He sighed, running a hand over his neatly trimmed beard, but didn't turn around. "About what?" "About you. About this. The way you've been acting." He chuckled, low and mocking. "And how have I been acting, Emily?" She swallowed hard. "Controlling. Angry. Jealous over nothing. You broke my phone, Daniel. You humiliated me at breakfast. This is not normal." His shoulders tensed. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then he turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I protect what's mine, Emily. I don't like seeing you act carelessly. Smiling at men, chatting with strangers." "Carelessly?" she repeated, stunned. "I was just being polite. That doesn't mean I'm disrespecting you." His jaw clenched. A good wife knows her place. Something inside Emily snapped. "And what does that mean, Daniel?" "That I should sit quietly while you control my every move." He took a step forward, his voice dangerously low. "Watch your tone, Emily." Fear crawled up her spine, but she refused to back down. "Or what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his wallet and keys. "I'm going out. Maybe when I come back, you'll remember how to be a respectful wife." Without another word, he walked out and slammed the door behind him. The moment he was gone, Emily's chest tightened with panic. This wasn't just jealousy. This was control, pure and dangerous. She needed to leave. But how? Her phone was destroyed. She was in a foreign country with no family, no friends, and no way to call for help. Then she remembered Maria, the housekeeper who had spoken to her on the beach. She had sensed something was wrong. Maybe she could help. Without wasting time, Emily grabbed a shawl and hurried out of the villa, her heart pounding in her chest. The resort's hallways felt like a maze, but she finally spotted Maria near the staff quarters, folding fresh towels. "Maria," she whispered urgently. The older woman turned, her eyes widening. "Sister, what is wrong?" "I need help," Emily pleaded. "My husband, he's not the man I thought he was. I need to leave before something happens." Maria glanced around before lowering her voice. "You are sure?" "Yes." Emily's voice cracked. "I'm afraid of what he might do next." Maria nodded, her face grim. "There is a way, but we must be careful." Hope flickered inside Emily. "Please help me." But neither of them noticed the shadow lurking behind the corner. Daniel was watching, and he had heard everything. Emily's heart raced as Maria whispered instructions, her voice calm but urgent. "There is a bus that leaves for the mainland in the morning. I can get you on it, but you must be ready before sunrise." Emily nodded, gripping Maria's hands. "Thank you. I'll do whatever it takes." She turned to leave, hope flickering in her chest. But the moment she stepped into the hallway, she froze. Daniel stood a few feet away, arms crossed, his face a mask of cold fury. For a brief second, neither of them moved. Then, in a slow, measured voice, he said, "Going somewhere, my love?" Emily's throat went dry. She forced a shaky laugh, hoping to play it off. "I was just talking to Maria about something." Daniel's eyes flickered past her to the housekeeper, who quickly looked down, avoiding his gaze. "Maria," he said smoothly, his voice dripping with false charm. "Thank you for taking care of my wife, but I'll handle things from here." Emily felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She knew that tone, calm on the surface but filled with a quiet, simmering rage. She turned to Maria, silently pleading with her. But the older woman only gave a slight nod before retreating down the hallway. There was nothing she could do now without putting herself in danger. "Come, Emily," Daniel said, reaching for her wrist. His grip was firm, almost painful. "Daniel, let's talk about this," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. He leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. I said, "Come with me." She had no choice. With every step back to their villa, she felt like she was walking toward her own grave. The moment they were inside, Daniel locked the door. Emily's pulse spiked. "Daniel, please." His eyes blazed. "You were going to leave me." She swallowed hard. "You scared me, Daniel. I just needed some space." He let out a bitter laugh. "Space? You're my wife, Emily. You don't get to run away just because you don't like how I handle things." She took a step back, but he followed. The air between them crackled with tension. "I love you," she tried, her voice shaking. "But this isn't love, Daniel." His expression darkened. "You don't get to decide that." Then he slapped her. The force sent her staggering backward, pain flooding across her cheek. For a moment, she just stood there, stunned. He had never hit her before. Not during their courtship, not even when his jealousy had gotten bad. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You hit me," she whispered. Daniel stared at his hand, like even he was shocked by what he had done. But the moment passed quickly. His face hardened. "You made me do it, Emily." She sucked in a sharp breath. This was it. The mask was off. She had to get out now. Her eyes darted toward the door, but before she could move, Daniel lunged. He grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her. "You're my wife. Do you hear me? You belong to me." Terror flooded through her. "Daniel, let me go." But he wasn't listening anymore. His grip tightened, his breaths coming out in ragged bursts. Then he pushed her. She stumbled backward, her foot catching the edge of the bed. She fell hard, hitting the bedside table and knocking over a glass that shattered on the floor. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Daniel took a slow step forward. "Look what you made me do," he murmured. Emily scrambled to her feet. She needed to get out before it was too late. But Daniel was already blocking the door. And this time, he wasn't going to let her go. Emily's heart pounded as she backed away, her eyes darting around the room for an escape. There was none. Daniel stood between her and the only exit, his chest rising and falling with barely contained rage. She could still feel the sting of his slap, the burning pain in her back where she had hit the bedside table. But now none of that mattered. She had to get out before he did something worse. "Daniel, please," she tried again, her voice shaking. "Let's just calm down and talk." He let out a bitter laugh. "Talk? You were planning to leave me, Emily. After everything I've done for you. You don't own me," she said through gritted teeth. Something in his eyes shifted, a dangerous flicker. "Oh, but I do. You said your vows, didn't you? Till death do us part." A chill ran down her spine. "Daniel, you're scaring me." His jaw clenched. "Good." Then he lunged. Emily barely had time to react. She ducked as he swung at her, his fist grazing her shoulder. She stumbled backward, grabbing the bedside lamp and hurling it at him. It shattered against his chest, making him roar in anger. She sprinted toward the bathroom, slamming the door behind her and locking it just as he crashed into it. "Open the door, Emily," he bellowed. She pressed both hands over her mouth to muffle her sobs. "Think." Her eyes darted around the small space. There was a tiny window too small to climb through. The only weapon she had was a glass cup on the sink. Another bang. The door shook violently. "You can't hide from me, Emily," Daniel bellowed. "You're my wife. You belong to me." Emily forced herself to breathe. If she didn't act now, she might not survive. Her fingers tightened around the glass cup. Then the door burst open. Daniel charged in, eyes wild with fury. Emily swung the glass with all her strength, smashing it against his face. He let out a cry of pain, clutching his bleeding cheek. It was her only chance. She shoved past him, sprinting out of the bathroom and toward the door. Her fingers fumbled with the lock, but before she could turn it, Daniel grabbed her from behind. "You're not going anywhere," he snarled, yanking her backward. She screamed, kicking and clawing at him, but he was too strong. Daniel threw her against the dresser, making her gasp in pain. His face was twisted with pure rage now, blood dripping from the gash on his cheek. "You ruined everything," he growled. "Daniel, please." He didn't listen. He grabbed her by the throat. Emily's eyes widened in terror as his fingers tightened. "You think you can leave me?" he hissed. "You're mine, Emily. And if I can't have you—" She clawed at his hands, struggling for air. Black spots danced in her vision. She was slipping. "Daniel, please." But his grip only tightened. The last thing Emily saw was his face, twisted and unrecognizable, before everything faded to darkness. The villa was eerily silent now, except for the sound of Daniel's ragged breathing. He loosened his grip and let go. Emily's body slumped to the floor, motionless. Her eyes, once filled with life, stared blankly at the ceiling. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, staring at what he had done. His hands trembled as he looked at her bruised neck. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. "She made me do this," he whispered to himself. "She was going to leave me." But even as he tried to justify it, a sickening feeling settled in his gut. Emily was dead and he had killed her. Panic set in. He couldn't just leave her there. He had to think. He rushed to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. The cut on his cheek stung, but it was nothing compared to the mess he had made. His mind reeled. He needed a plan. First, he had to make it look like an accident. His eyes darted to the open balcony door. The villa was on the second floor, overlooking the beach. It wasn't high, but if he staged it right, people might believe she fell. He turned back to Emily's body. His hands shook as he bent down, sliding his arms under her limp frame. She felt so light now. "I'm sorry, Emily," he muttered, though even he wasn't sure if he meant it. Slowly, he carried her toward the balcony. The warm night air hit his face as he stepped outside. The waves crashed gently against the shore below, the perfect cover. With a deep breath, he heaved her body over the railing. For a moment, she seemed to hang in the air. Then she fell, the sound of her body hitting the rocky ground. Daniel stepped back inside, forcing himself to stay calm. Now he had to play the grieving husband. He grabbed his phone and dialed the resort's front desk. "Hello," he said, his voice frantic. "My wife. She fell from the balcony. Please, send help." The receptionist gasped. "Stay where you are, sir. We're sending security now." Daniel dropped the phone and ran his hands through his hair, rehearsing the act in his mind. By the time the resort staff arrived, he was crouched on the floor, face buried in his hands. The security guard rushed in. "Sir, where is she?" Daniel looked up, eyes red, voice shaking. "She's down there. Please tell me she's alive." But deep down, he already knew the answer. The night air was thick with tension as resort security and medical personnel rushed to the scene. The glow from flashlights flickered over Emily's lifeless body, sprawled on the rocky shore below the villa. Daniel stood on the balcony, his face buried in his hands, playing the role of the devastated husband. A hotel manager placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Sir, we need you to come with us." Daniel nodded, forcing his breath to come out in shaky gasps, as if he were in shock. He had to sell this. Downstairs, paramedics checked the body, but it was clear she was gone. "Time of death, approximately an hour ago," one of them said. The words sent a chill through Daniel, but he remained quiet, his hands shaking. "Sir," one of the security officers asked gently, "can you tell us what happened?" Daniel took a deep breath. This was it. He had to get the story right. We had a small argument," he began, his voice trembling. "She needed some air, so she went to the balcony. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, she was gone." He let out a choked sob for effect. "I looked over the edge, and she was just lying there." A few of the staff exchanged glances, but no one spoke. "Did she fall?" one of the guards asked. Daniel nodded quickly. "She must have slipped. It was dark. The railing isn't very high. Oh God, I should have stopped her." He buried his face in his hands, giving them the perfect image of a heartbroken man. But as the investigators arrived, His carefully crafted story was about to be put to the test. Within an hour, local police were on the scene, questioning resort staff and examining the balcony. It didn't take long for them to notice something was off. One officer, Detective Harris, stood at the edge of the balcony, frowning. "There's something strange about this," he murmured to his partner. "What do you mean?" Harris ran a hand over the railing. "If she simply slipped, there would be scuff marks here. But the dust is undisturbed. It's almost as if she was lifted over." His partner stiffened. "You think she was pushed?" Harris didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his gaze toward Daniel, who was still sobbing in the living room. Something doesn't add up. Back inside, Daniel sat on the couch, hands shaking as he sipped water. When Detective Harris walked in, he immediately straightened, trying to appear devastated but cooperative. "Mr. Carter," Harris said, sitting across from him, "I need to ask you a few questions." Daniel nodded, swallowing hard. "Of course. How long had you and your wife been married?" "Just a few weeks," Daniel said, his voice cracking. "This was our honeymoon." Harris nodded. "And you said she fell while you were in the bathroom?" "Yes." "Did you hear anything? A scream? A struggle?" Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, nothing. If I had, I would have—" He stopped, letting fake tears well up in his eyes. "I would have saved her." Harris's gaze didn't waver. "Did you and your wife argue often?" Daniel stiffened. "No. I mean, every couple has disagreements, but nothing serious." Harris's expression remained unreadable. "That's interesting, because one of the staff members mentioned that they heard shouting coming from your room earlier tonight." Daniel's pulse spiked. I mean, we had a small disagreement, but it wasn't anything." "What was it about?" Harris cut in. Daniel hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for the detective to notice. "Just travel plans," Daniel said quickly. "She wanted to visit the markets, but I thought it was too late." Harris hummed, writing something down. "One last question," he said, looking directly at Daniel. "Why is there fresh blood on your face?" Daniel froze. For the first time that night, he realized he had made a mistake. The cut. He had forgotten about the wound on his cheek from Emily's desperate struggle. It's nothing," he stammered. I cut myself shaving earlier." Detective Harris arched a brow. "Shaving? At night?" Silence. Daniel had no answer. Harris leaned in. "Sir, I need you to come with us to the station for further questioning." But deep down, he knew they were closing in. At the police station, Daniel sat in a cold interrogation room, his hands clenched into fists. Across from him, Detective Harris flipped through his notes. "Your wife fell, yet there are no signs of a struggle on the balcony." Daniel swallowed hard. I don't know what happened. Maybe she lost her balance." Harris didn't blink. "Then explain the bruises on her neck." Daniel's blood ran cold. "The autopsy will tell us everything," Harris continued. "Would you like to change your story now?" Daniel shook his head. But inside, he knew it was over. The autopsy report came in fast. Emily had been strangled. Bruising on her neck, burst blood vessels in her eyes, clear signs of homicide. Detective Harris confronted Daniel with the evidence. "She didn't fall, Mr. Carter. You killed her." Daniel's facade crumbled. His hands trembled, his breathing uneven. It was an accident," he whispered. But there was no escaping the truth now. The dream vacation had become a nightmare, one that would haunt him forever. Faced with undeniable evidence, Daniel finally broke. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "I didn't mean to kill her. We argued. She said she was leaving me. I just lost control." Detective Harris remained unmoved. "You strangled your wife, then staged a fall. That's murder, Daniel." Daniel buried his face in his hands. There was no escape. His fate was sealed. Daniel stood in a packed Maui courtroom, his face pale as the judge read the verdict. Guilty of murder. His legs felt weak. Life in prison. Emily's family wept. Justice served. As officers led him away, reality sank in. His dream life was over. If you were captivated by this chilling tale of love, betrayal, and tragedy, don't stop here. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join us on the last confession as we dive deeper into the darkest corners of human nature. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Emily's shoes? And remember, not every fairy tale has a happy ending. Stay tuned for more stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew.